In my first ever video, I shared why I think everyone should have a small-scale food forest, no matter whether you have a garden or just a small yard. So what does that look like in real life? The feel, the structure, the layers. Today I'm giving tours of real working small-scale food forests, including my own, and showing you how abundance can thrive in the tiniest of spaces. So let's go. A forest garden is an intentionally designed edible ecosystem, and they come in all shapes and sizes. So when you think about a natural woodland, and we think about the term food forest, and you might be thinking of huge forests with large trees where the canopy is completely joined together, and this isn't really what a food forest is like at all. Whereas when we're talking about designing a food forest looking at nature for inspiration, what we're really talking about is the woodland edge. So where a forest or a woodland meets an open space. So we're looking at all the different layers within that, from the large canopy trees, the smaller canopy trees, the shrubs, the herbaceous layer, the ground cover layer, and then even the things that grow in the soil, the root crops, and then all the vines that grow up through all of those. When you want to design a small-scale food forest, you don't have to fit in all of the layers, and that would equally be taking the inspiration from nature. When you go and see a natural bit of woodland, it doesn't have every single layer in every single square metre. And also these small spaces in our garden, you know, they are our garden and we want them to look beautiful. As gardeners, we love plants for their beauty, so we don't want to skimp on that, we don't want to miss that out. And there's absolutely no reason why you should compromise on the beauty of your garden just because you want to grow food crops and do it in harmony with nature. In this video, I'm going to be showing you a sneak peek of some of the food forests that I've designed and that I manage, different examples of different kinds. But first, we're going to do a quick tour of the garden here. This food forest is quite a young food forest. This side was only planted about 2 years ago and the other side literally a couple of months ago. Even this small space behind me, it's producing food, it's creating habitat, and it will get less and less work to maintain every year. If I turn the camera around, you can see how popular this skirret is with all sorts of creatures. It's a really beautiful plant. So I will be eating the root this autumn when it dies down. And then there's this edible aster, which I haven't actually tried yet because this is the first year that it's really been large enough to harvest from. But I'm really loving the flowers, I think they're really pretty. And behind those I have this huge Taunton-Dean kale. So I have in the past trained these upright to be like a tree, but this one you can see is just kind of sprawling out of control. But what's been really interesting is how many cabbage white butterflies there have been around and clearly laying eggs on this. But actually we might just be able to catch wasp here. So wasps absolutely love the caterpillars from brassicas. We seem to have a lot of wasps around. I don't know whether they eat the eggs as well, but I just think it's really interesting that it's really not been nibbled much at all, considering how many butterflies I've seen. The ecosystem must be doing its job. I've got some honeyberries. I've got 2 in here because they were planted when I was doing a show garden, and really I need to separate them out because they're going to get very big, and they're already swamping out this poor blackcurrant here, which I need to prune back the honeyberry a bit to give it a bit more space. That's one of the biggest jobs really in forest gardens, is actually managing the size of things. So we can do that by eating them. So I've got another kale here, much smaller than the Taunton-Dean. This is Benton's panache. These beautiful variegated edges, and it's a much smaller kale. So if you've got really quite limited space, instead of the big sprawling Taunton-Dean, something like this panache is much nicer, much easier to keep in check. And behind that, I've got this Japanese wineberry. It's using the Taunton-Dean kale here as a bit of support. And you can see right down here, I need to give these a bit of support as well. These absolutely beautiful red furry looking fruit. So the flowers, it's been flowering and now the fruit will be ripening soon. Around the front edge, I've got herbs like chamomile, I've got some perennial onions like Welsh onions and some hooker's onion. This beautiful Miss Wilmot's ghost, an eryngium, so that's, pollinators love that. In fact, you can see a couple of those handy wasps on there eating all my caterpillars. Got things like Chinese artichoke and Jerusalem artichoke as well. And you can see the trees that I have in here are still quite small. So these were only planted last year, I think it was. And underneath those, I have some of the herbaceous layer. So some of these onions, and underneath that, this ajuga, making a really, really effective ground cover, and even starting to creep out of its bed and onto the path. When I visited the RISC rooftop forest garden in Reading, it was absolutely pouring with rain, and it was in the middle of a thunderstorm, so on top of a roof was not the best place to be, but it was absolutely stunning. I was amazed by how much you could fit onto a rooftop. And if you're interested in looking into whether or not your roof might be structurally okay, then they've got all sorts of really amazing information on their website, and they've even got plant lists as well, so it's really well worth having a look through. They've got a little leaflet as well that goes along with the garden. And I think just what amazed me so much was that I wasn't expecting there to be fully grown trees up there, you know, seating areas and gravel pathways. I mean, you'd have absolutely never known that it was on top of a rooftop, and I think it just really showed me quite how much we could do with small spaces that we wouldn't even necessarily have thought of putting a garden on. So yeah, it was really inspiring to visit, and I was absolutely blown away by the space. I've been developing the gardens at the Ecology Building Society now for somewhere around 6 or 7 years, and this food forest border has been one of my favourite parts of the garden to develop and plant. We were lucky enough to have a mature dwarf plum and a dwarf apple, and also an absolutely huge male sea buckthorn tree as well. So the main thing that I've been adding into this border are the herbaceous layers, and I've gone with a mix of herbs. So we've got things like lemon balm and bronze fennel, bergamot and mint, and then I've added in some ground cover layer. So we've got the lamb's ears, the Stachys byzantina, and things like violas as well. And I've also added in some dye plants, so I've got some goldenrod as well. And then I've added in a few shrubs. I've got a Szechuan pepper, I've got the simulans, which doesn't need a pollinating partner, and I've also added in some things like gooseberries, and I've got some boysenberries at the back as well, and there's some blackcurrants in there. We've also got loads of plants for pollinators, and even things like the Stachys byzantina, which the wool carder bee can take the fibres off for its nest. And what's really lovely is that some people from DB Orthodontics, which is just round the corner from the Ecology Building Society, had seen the garden that we were doing there and really loved it so much that they asked us to recreate some forest island beds within a banking on their industrial estate just round the corner, and we've packed it full of all sorts of edible plants, so things like Babington leeks, raspberries, perennial kale, but we've also filled it full of plants for pollinators. So instead of this almost sterile really bit of grass which was no use for wildlife, it's now absolutely buzzing with life, loads of insects there, and crops for the staff to come and pick as well, which they really, really appreciate, being able to just pop out at lunchtime and pick some gooseberries or take a few leaves of kale home for tea. So it's just been so lovely that the garden at Ecology Building Society is just sort of spread around the industrial estate. So we'll have to see if anyone else requests a forest garden in their little patch of their business. And so it might be small and quite young trees right now, but soon there'll be large trees, and the staff will be able to take home baskets full of fruit as well. And those of you who follow me on Instagram will know how much fun I had designing the mandala food forest at Esholt Hall Gardens for Yorkshire Water. The design was based around a central space for teaching and things like yoga, and then The 5 different sections were given different themes, so there was medicinal plants, there was plants for wildlife, plants for crafting, and some for forage as well. And I'll be going back soon to record a full garden tour, so subscribe to catch that because it's going to be really interesting to see how it's matured. And the smallest food forest I've ever designed was this border at the Harrogate Flower Show, and I just bought out my book, Plant Lover's Backyard Forest Garden, and I wanted to show what you could achieve in even the smallest of spaces. And I managed to fit in 6 of the 7 layers, but it was in early April, so not much was growing at the time. So now you've seen what's possible in this small space, what might that look like in your own garden? And in the next video, I'll walk you through how to start designing your very own food forest, even if you've never done anything like this before. I read every comment and I always reply, and I'd love to know, what would you like to see in your dream food forest?